All right, welcome to JNUC Day 3. We have a really interesting morning with lots of cool sessions yet to go. Hopefully, for those in attendance here, you had fun at the party last night. Woo woo, a few woos. Awesome. Today we have threat hunting with Jamf Protect. And a quick note about Q&A. You can open the JNUC app at any time during the session and enter questions and vote for questions, and people that are streaming it live can do the same thing. At the end, I'll be reading some of those questions, and our presenters will be answering them, and we'll also be able to take some questions from people in the room. I will repeat them so that people online will be able to hear it. And with that, here is Maggie and Mike with Threat Hunting with Jamf Protect.
Finding out you have a malicious actor inside your organization is a nightmare scenario for most every admin. Fortunately, Jamf has the tools you need to strengthen your security posture and shield your environment from attackers inside and out. Let's take a look at how to harness the potential of Jamf Pro and Jamf Protect to manage and secure your devices. These tools will enable us to expose the attacker, eliminate the threat, and put additional measures in place that will stop this from ever happening again. I'm Maggie Zernhelt. Nice to see you all here. I'm a software engineer on the Jamf Protect team, and I work on the system extension. And I've been with Jamf for 3-ish years, and I use she, her pronouns.
Good morning, my name is Michael Levinik. My pronouns are he, him. Been with Jamf about 9 years, where I currently do QA for Jamf Protect, and I'm also the creator of a tool you might be familiar with known as the MUT, or Mass Update Tool. So today we're going to be going through a few different technologies that you may or may not be familiar with. We're just going to level set at the start and talk about some things to make sure we're all on the same page. We're going to do the same with some security terminology as well. And after that, we're going to dive into a little bit of a role play. There is an inside attack here at Acme Corporation. And so we're going to lay out that attack, and then we're going to hunt that attack and remediate it with Jamf Protect. We're going to host a post-incident review, and there will be time for questions at the end. One of the things I do want to point out about this role play, Maggie and I spent a lot of time talking to legal, talking to InfoSec, talking to our Threat Labs team. We compiled bespoke malware for this situation. We installed it in our test environment. Nothing that you're going to see here today has been spoofed. This is true malware that we were actually running. We wanted to put our money where our mouth was and make sure that our product can stop an attack, whether it's known or unknown. And the videos that you're seeing of remediation are all in real time, so nothing's been sped up that you're going to see either. When we dive into that roleplay, I'll be playing the part of InfoSec for Acme Corporation, and I'll be seeing that my environment is under attack and trying to put a stop to that.
And in the roleplay, I'll be playing the part of a disgruntled employee who is posing a threat that they see as a victimless crime, but it'll be offering pirated episodes of my favorite show to my coworkers, along with installing a discrete crypto miner that they won't know about. But they're not paying for the electricity, so really, what's the harm? Let's first, like Mike mentioned, review the technologies. So first, malware is probably a term that you're already familiar with, but just to be sure that we're all on the same page, we define malware as any software that you probably do not want running on your system. This could be something as severe as a virus stealing your information, but potentially unwanted programs such as browser extensions that display ads can also fall into this category. One type of malware is a crypto miner. The following description is definitely an oversimplification, but it'll get the point across. A crypto miner is a type of program that uses a computer's processing power to get digital currencies called cryptocurrencies. These cryptocurrencies can be exchanged for fiat currencies like the US dollar. The process of mining for these cryptocurrencies puts a toll on your system or whatever system is used to mine, rather, shortening its life and also costing more electricity than usual.
On the remediation side of things, we're going to be taking a look at Jamf Protect. Jamf Protect is Jamf's macOS endpoint security and malware protection tool. One of the key features we're going to be looking at is the endpoint threat prevention feature, which is sort of traditional malware as people think about it, matching file hashes and code signatures and things like that. But in addition to that, we have some behavior-based detections we're going to be taking a look at as well. Those behavior-based detections can have behaviors defined either by Jamf or by the admin itself, and we're going to use both. There's a feature for controlling USB storage, which we're going to be looking at. And then finally, we're going to look at the Pro and Protect integration and how we can leverage that as well. So to use that Pro and Protect integration, we're going to have to look at Jamf Pro. This is Jamf's flagship Apple mobile device management framework. And the Pro and Protect integration can do some really clever things with regards to incident response, threat isolation, elimination, and stuff like that. And then finally, we're going to be using a SIM, or sometimes you hear it pronounced SIEM. Either way, it stands for System Information and Event Management. Basically, it's just a big bucket, and it's a bucket that fills up with logs. Those logs can come from any number of places, like Pro, Protect, your network controller, and things like that. And this is sort of that attempt to give admins that single pane of glass into everything that's happening in their environment to make their lives easier. Here at Acme Corporation, the SIEM that we leverage is Splunk, and so we're going to be using Splunk for our forensic analysis here today. So to stop a malicious actor, we sometimes need to think like a malicious actor. The things that a malicious actor wants to accomplish, sometimes their end goals are a bit different, but generally they do a lot of the same things, and we call those things TTPs. It stands for tactics, techniques, and procedures. The tactic is sort of a high level, what do they want to accomplish? Like, get initial access to a machine, evade detection, get escalated privileges, things like that. The techniques and procedures are more specific, like low-level information about how they're going to go about accomplishing those things. When we put all of those TTPs together, we sometimes refer to that as a kill chain, because these things need to happen in a certain order for malware to be successful. You have to get access, you have to elevate privileges, and then do what you want to do. So I'm going to hand it over to Maggie to talk about the attack that she has in mind and the kill chain for it.
So what I'm thinking is if I could get a crypto miner on our work computers, I could make some extra money, and as I said before, it would be a victimless crime, in my mind. We refresh our work machines anyway every few years, and it's not like my coworkers would be paying for the electricity, so it won't be hurting them. Still, probably I'll want to hide the crypto miner so that people don't get suspicious. So, as far as an introduction to the tactics, first I need to gain initial access to my victim's systems, and I will do that through a tactic called the initial attack vector. My technique for initial attack vector in this attack will be using a USB stick where I will put the pirated shows along with a modified VLC installer that will be my way into my victim's environment. Another thing that I need to do is leverage the tactic of persistence. That just means that the malware that uses persistence will keep doing what it's supposed to do past reboots or quits of the affected software. Some common ways of doing this include launch daemons, launch agents, cron jobs, browser extensions. So my technique for persistence in this attack will be using a launch daemon to launch my binary once the installer has finished running. So infecting one machine with malware for me is an accomplishment, but really I want to affect as many machines as possible so I can make as much money as possible. I can do this through a tactic called lateral movement. An attacker will often use a network connection to accomplish this tactic, but USB is another viable option. My technique in this attack for lateral movement will be social engineering. I will have my victims themselves will share the malware over airdrop. So I really don't even have to do anything. They'll want to share it. Often, malware needs elevated privileges to do the things that it wants to do, things that are restricted for a regular user, like loading a launch daemon. So, and that's setting up persistence, again. So getting access to root level permissions is done through a tactic called privilege escalation. My technique for privilege escalation is clever, if I do say so myself. The end user is prompt upon running an installer to enter their password into a prompt like this. You may know from experience that end users blindly enter their password into this prompt when they see it. So that'll give me all of the privilege escalation that I need. If an attacker like me were to install a crypto miner on their victim's machine on the desktop and just call it crypto miner, the victim would probably catch on pretty quickly. So usually attackers use a tactic called defense evasion, which is really just making itself harder to see, or making the malware harder to see. My technique for defense evasion in this attack will be using or changing the name of my daemon and my binary to match the media player related theme of their surroundings. So finally, the tactic that we're all really here for, the one that we care about most. The moment that the binary runs, execution. In this case, the execution of my crypto miner. The technique for execution in my attack is a post-install script in the installer package. The post-install script will load my disguised launch daemon, which in turn will run my disguised executable, the crypto miner. So if we take a look at the contents of the modified VLC installer package, we can see that in /applications, we have the real VLC application. So the user will get what they want. Additionally, we can see in /library /application support /VLC, we have the crypto miner binary that I renamed to match its surroundings, like I mentioned before. Finally, in /library /launch daemons, we see that we have my disguised launch daemon plist. Additionally, the post-install script that I mentioned before is here. Pretty simple, just loads the daemon when the installer is finished running. So let's take a look at my ideal scenario on a victim's machine. First, I'll have my victim plug in their USB, and they want to get right to watching the shows, but QuickTime can't do that, so they'll just have to use this handy VLC installer that's right in there. They'll enter their password, and as I said before, they're left with a real VLC app, so they can do what they want and watch the shows. But what they don't know at this point is that they have a crypto miner running. And since we know, we can go and look for it, but we will see that it does have some suspicious looking parameters that kind of expose it as something not so good.
So that's kind of the worst case scenario for me in my environment. I want to take a moment to rewind, and let's look at what this attack would look like if I had leveraged all the tools at my disposal to increase my security posture with Jamf. I'm going to first get Jamf Protect installed, and then we're going to take a look at how threat prevention blocks this attack from fully executing. But I'm going to want to stop it a little bit earlier. So I'm going to look at some alerts and telemetry information, and then use features like device controls and the Jamf Pro integration to stop the kill chain a little bit earlier in the process. For starters, I need to get Jamf Protect involved in my installed in my environment. The good news is I'm already a Jamf Pro customer, and I already set up the Pro and Protect API integration. So for step one, I'm going to head into settings and search for Jamf Protect. There's a little checkbox in here that I need to check that will automatically install the PKG once a plan lands on the machine. Step 2, I'm going to scope the plans. So I head over to Computers and Configuration Profiles, find my default plan, and I'm just going to scope that to my entire fleet. I'm not doing anything fancy just yet. So I think this is the part where we normally say there is no step 3. At this point, Jamf Pro is pushing that configuration profile to my entire fleet, and then an install enterprise application command happens automatically in the background that will install the protect agent and extension, and my fleet will be protected right away. So we're going to take another look at what Maggie's attack would look like now that Jamf Protect is running just in its default state in my environment.
So same as before, I have my victim plug the USB in. And really, the difference this time only is that the crypto miner will be detected by Jamf Protect's threat prevention through its threat signature, its hash, which will end up killing the binary before it has a chance to execute at all.
Yeah, I want to draw emphasis to that last point. This isn't a situation where the miner is kicking off and then being killed or something like that. Jamf Protect intercepts the request to execute and says, no, I am not authorizing this execution. The problem is stopped before it ever has a chance to become a problem even for a second. So at this point, our attacker is done for. They just don't really know it yet. I just got an email that's telling me that a process was denied execution in my environment, and there is a handy link here that I can click that'll take me right to the pertinent alert in Jamf Protect. Clicking that link, I can see that I have an alert here telling me that there was a threat execution event, and it tells me that the thing that matched is called Library Application Support VLC Media Controller, and that seems pretty innocent. But Jamf Protect also tells me that this matched something known as XMRig. I'd never heard of XMRig, did a bit of Googling. Turns out it's a crypto miner, which is certainly something that I don't want running in my environment. That'll shorten the life of my devices and cost the company money and electricity.
So what I'm hearing from that overview is that I just need to make malware that is not known by the Jamf Threat Labs team, right? Something custom, like a custom script maybe?
Yeah, one of the things I failed to point out here is that this is the threat prevention feature that stopped this, and so as Maggie said, this is a known threat. We matched on a signature, a device hash, or a file hash, or a YAR rule, something like that. So she's thinking that if she can come up with something new and original that Threat Labs doesn't know the hash of, maybe, that she'll be fine. She could try that, but the good news is that Jamf Protect also has behavior-based detections that look for suspicious behaviors, whether the attack is something known or unknown. Now, this is kind of like if you go to the doctor, you're not feeling well, and they test you for RSV, they test you for influenza, they test you for COVID, and those tests all come back negative, but you've got a fever of 103 and you're coughing and sneezing everywhere. I really hope that that doctor is going to advise that you don't go into work or to any public events because you're exhibiting suspicious behaviors, even if we don't know what's causing them and even if all of our tests came back negative. And these behavior-based analytics are the security equivalent of that. In fact, I received another email about the launch daemon that you used for persistence. This email tells me that a launch daemon was created for persistence and that it was highly suspicious persistence. I'm curious why Jamf Protect thinks that it was highly suspicious. So again, I'm going to click that little link. And Jamf Protect tells me that this was a launch daemon that was created and that is a plist disguised as Apple. I do a little bit of reading. Turns out that basically this launch daemon was pretending to be from Apple, and Jamf Protect knows that it was not created by Apple. And generally, good software is never going to pretend to be from Apple if it's not. That's a suspicious behavior. Jamf Protect tells me this is something that attackers may use for persistence as well as defense evasion, two of the tactics that we talked about earlier. And it tells me the name of the launch daemon, com.apple.mediaplayerd. It also tells me that the thing that this launch daemon is launching is this application support VLC media controller, which I know from my previous alert is actually the XMRig malware. And it also shows me those parameters that Maggie mentioned earlier, which are a little bit suspicious. VLC is probably never going to be running called Monero hash. So at this point, I can click into this link above and find out a little bit more about my victim if I want, but I'm actually going to shift gears, and I want to find out about my attacker and try to put some rules in place to stop this. Now, the good news for the attacker, not for me, is that I have no other alerts in my environment, so it seems that my attacker was intelligent enough not to run this malware on their own system. But the good news for me is that I have telemetry set up in my environment as well. Now, telemetry is an additional feature in Jamf Protect that gives us insight into all sorts of stuff that's happening on the machine, just a plethora of information that, frankly, you're not going to want to dig through most of the time. We can see things like every network connection, every file execution, every process execution, every USB plug event or USB file write are available in here as well. You don't want to be digging through that most of the time, but if something is happening in your environment, all of that information is incredibly valuable for forensic analysis. So in my configuration, I have it set up for level 2 and verbose, which is going to give me the most information possible. We also allow for the collection of log files. I'm going to use this to collect my Jamf log. That way my Jamf logs end up in my SIM, and I can take a look at them if I ever want to. And additionally, we have the option to create a local file on the machine where you can dig through these telemetry logs, in addition to sending them up to the SIM, as I mentioned in this case, Splunk. Now, I am not the greatest at searching Splunk in the roleplay or in real life, but I do know that the threat that I'm looking for is called XMRig. So I'm just going to search my entire Splunk environment for that little string. So I set up the index, and then I just type XMRig. But I did find this fancy stats command on Google, and that shows me every host that matches and a number of counts for that host. In this case, I only find one host, Beatrice's MacBook Air, and there's 1,600 matches. I think I'm getting close. Clicking into the events, I can get a little bit more information about Beatrice's MacBook Air. I can find the serial number, the UUID, user information is available in here as well. And I can see the arguments that were called. In this case, this is that CP command that was used for defense evasion. So somebody on Beatrice's MacBook Air ran a command to rename known malware to something called media controller, and I don't like that one bit. I want a little bit more information about how all of this happened. I reached out on the Mac admin Slack. Some incredibly smart folks there gave me some information about how to search Splunk. This, for example, shows the privilege escalation that was mentioned and all of the different processes that we're able to execute with elevated privileges because my end user blindly typed their password into that field. And so now I think I have my malicious actor caught red-handed, and I have a bunch more information about the USB device that was being used, the files that were being used. All of that is here in Splunk, and I gather all of it. So it's time to be a little bit proactive and stop this kill chain even earlier. Even though threat prevention is doing its job and stopping this miner from running, it's just going to make me feel a little bit more comfortable to do a bit more. So as I mentioned, we have information about all of the USB events, the plugs and writes and things like that, and the serial number of that USB stick that was being used is something that I have access to. I'm going to take that serial number of the USB stick, and I'm going to go and build a device controls rule around it. The device controls rule that I'm going to put in place is going to default to read and write. My users get really grumpy if I stop them from plugging in USB sticks on any machine. And I want my developers, my marketing folks, et cetera, to be productive in their role. So I'm going to default to read and write. I don't have to, but in my environment, that's the choice that I'm going for. But I'm going to override that rule with a prevention. And this prevention is going to target that specific serial number of that specific USB device so that it cannot be mounted, but anything else can. If the event, or in the event that that USB device does get plugged in, I can also display a message to my end users, and that's customizable. So I choose to say, you may be the target of a crypto mining scam. Please contact IT for more information.
So by the time the admin has gone through all these steps and set up this device controls rule, I've moved on to my next victim. Let's see from their perspective what it looks like to have this device controls rule in place. So first, again, I'll have them plug in the device that holds the malware, but this time a pop-up shows up and the message matches what the admin entered in the console. I need to look into what's going on here, so I'll try to force mount from disk utility, but it doesn't work. So now I'm wondering, do other USBs still mount okay? Yep, looks like they do. It's just that one. I think that I've been caught. That's okay though, my file sharing isn't over. I can just use AirDrop at this point to share my malware, or have my users share it with each other. So it's not a problem. And even if my organization were to block AirDrop, there are lots of ways to share files, so I'm not stopped yet.
Yeah, that's true. There's a lot of different ways to move information about in an environment, and trying to stop each of them individually sounds like a game of whack-a-mole that, frankly, I just don't feel like playing. What I really need to do is develop a way to find out if these files land on my machines no matter how they get there. And to do this, we're going to leverage the custom analytics that we talked about earlier. These are the same behavior-based detections that we talked about earlier with the plist disguised as Apple. But in this case, I, as the admin, can specify what I think a suspicious behavior is. So I'm going to create a new high-severity rule, and I'm going to look for any file system event. This is going to be, file writes, file deletions, file renames, anything like that, file system events in general, where the last path component, that is the name of the file, matches either media controller or vlc.pkg. I got the name of that PKG from my Splunk searches as well. And I did a little bit of digging, and a legitimate VLC installation uses a DMG, not a PKG, so I know that I'm safe from false positives in this situation. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to check this little checkbox that says Add to Jamf Pro Smart Group. And remember that we checked this checkbox. I'm going to talk about this checkbox because it does a couple things, and we're going to come back to it. And also remember that I used the keyword of crypto when I set all of this up. So jumping over to Jamf Pro, there's a couple of things that I need to set up to make this all work. I'm going to go to the settings, and I'm just going to search for extension attributes. The good news is there's a template here. So new from template, and search for Jamf Protect Smart Groups, and just save that from the template. And then I'm going to make a new smart group as well. And in the smart group, I am going to call it crypto scam. And then I'm going to add that extension attribute that I just created as my criteria. And I'm going to use the like operator. That's very important in this situation because of the way that this extension attribute populates. And I used that keyword of crypto that we talked about earlier. So now I have an extension attribute and I have a smart group. Anytime that analytic that I created runs, the device is going to get added to this smart group, which is pretty clever. But I mentioned that checkbox exists, and it does a couple of things. The other thing that it does is it is going to run a custom trigger for policies in Jamf Pro. So I'm going to create a new policy to clean up this mess, and I'm going to scope it to that smart group. I call it remediate crypto, and I'm going to use the custom trigger of protect. I mentioned that checkbox does two things. It's going to add devices to my smart group, and it's going to run any policy with this custom trigger. I set it to ongoing, and I scoped it to my smart group, as I said, and then I'm just going to add a little script here to clean everything up. The script is a bit rudimentary, but I think it should do the job. I'm going to unload the launch daemon if it had a chance to load. I am going to remove the launch daemon from the environment because I don't want it there anymore. I'm going to use kill all to kill that media controller binary. Again, this should all be a little bit redundant because threat prevention is doing its job, but hey, might as well throw it on there. After that, again, I did some digging, and a legitimate VLC installation doesn't put anything in application support. So I'm just going to nuke that entire directory from orbit. It's the only way to be sure. And then I'm going to use Jamf Helper to pop up some messaging to my end user and just alert them to what's going on. And I'm done messing around. I don't want the message to get missed, so it's going to be a full screen alert this time.
Since at this point, I suspect that the admin is onto me, I'm a little bit nervous to see what happens here, but let's try airdropping the file over to a new victim. So we can see first that as soon as the file transfers over, the user will open at my guidance, or with my guidance, they will bypass gatekeeper by opening it this way. And they, before they can even provide their credentials and the installer finishes running, we see the full screen pop-up that Mike just mentioned. So now I know that I'm done for. My attack has been thoroughly thwarted. I will guide you now step by step through what happened. We'll see that every part of the kill chain was either exposed or prevented through Jamf and its integrations. So first, we saw that the attacker wanted to execute a crypto miner binary that they compiled and disguised. Their technique was to use a post-install script to launch the daemon that would run the binary. Jamf Protect's endpoint threat prevention was able to save the day by matching the binary's hash as a known threat signature. For an attempt at stealthiness, the tactic of defense evasion was used, and the attacker, me, used the technique of renaming their binary and plist to match their surroundings. Jamf Protect's telemetry feature was able to record and eventually reveal what had happened, in this case, the rename of the binary. For privilege escalation to get root access to load the daemon, I leveraged the fact that installer packages ask for credentials. But Jamf Protect's telemetry feature, again, logged the authorization event here. So the attacker, me, the host name of my device, and the device ID were exposed, so the admin can find out who I was. For moving from one device to another, the tactic of lateral movement was employed, and I used airdrop for that. But the admin's Jamf Pro policy shows a full screen pop-up to inform the end user that they need to seek help. As far as starting up again after crashes, quits, or reboots, as persistent malware does, I made a disguised plist. But it triggered plist disguised as Apple, the analytic in the Jamf managed analytics set. An alert shows for it in the Jamf Protect console, as you saw. And then as far as gaining access to a system through an initial attack vector, I used a USB stick, which was blocked by Jamf Protect's device controls. So at this point, we've seen that every tactic and technique that I tried to use was either prevented or exposed by Jamf. Through threat hunting with Jamf Protect, we reviewed how to harness the full potential of Jamf Pro and Jamf Protect to manage and secure your devices. These tools enabled us to expose the attacker, eliminate the threat, and put additional measures in place to make sure that nothing like this ever happens again.
Thanks so much for listening to our presentation. We're going to have questions in just a moment, but before we do, I want to point out a couple of things. There's a handout for this presentation where we have some links to some documentation on how to set up the Pro Protect integration, some of the custom remediations that we did, and things like that. Additionally, a couple of sessions that we want to plug are, unfortunately, if you didn't see them live, you're going to have to catch the recordings because they were over the last couple of days. But our colleague Tice has a presentation of threat hunting and incident response with Jamf Protect and Microsoft Sentinel, which was fantastic. And Matt Benio of the Jamf Protect Threat Labs team did a presentation called The Art of Cryptojacking, where he dives really deep into some of this. He explains in detail like how threat prevention works. And he also tells the story of, like, this was fiction, what we just presented, but this malware, XMRig, was used in some pretty severe malware campaigns. And the Jamf Protect Threat Labs team was at the forefront of putting a stop to those campaigns. And he tells the true story of a situation pretty much exactly like this, diving deeper into how they found out about it and how they put a stop to it as well. And then one that we don't have on here, but we saw yesterday, I forget the name of the presenter, but there was a really cool presentation that was similar to ours, but they didn't tell the attacker side and just dove deeper into the remediation. And she did some really clever things like using dep notify instead of Jamf helper in the remediation integrations, and I recommend that one as well. So we're going to open up for questions, but also Maggie and I are around for the rest of the conference if you want to come up to us and ask us anything in person as well.
All right. So We have a few questions here in the app. And so there's quite a few questions related actually to like Jamf Protect versus Jamf Trust and the network threat prevention versus the detailed MAC prevention. It's kind of a summary of a bunch of different questions here about that. Can you just speak about that difference a little bit?
Yeah, I can speak to it a little bit, but to be honest, so as Maggie said, she's an engineer on the Jamf Protect macOS extension, and I do QA for that macOS extension. So our knowledge is a little bit limited as far as like the entire product portfolio. I recommend you reach out to a sales rep or somebody like that if you have more questions. But specifically, the product that we were taking a look at here today is the macOS extension for protection. But we do also have things that handle network security. There's some iOS options as well. And I can't speak to the specific differences between them, but I just saw Matt Taylor walk out, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And I know that he could speak to them very well.
All right, so something a little more relevant to this particular topic. What happens if the attacker modifies the serial number of the USB device to relaunch the attack?
Yeah, it's definitely possible. And again, that's sort of where we came up with the idea of whack-a-mole. If they had modified the serial of the USB, we have a couple of options. Device controls these rules that we can set up, we can do a number of different things. We can just wholesale block everything. We can force everything to mount read-only, which wouldn't really help in this situation because you could still launch an installer off of a read-only device, but it's a possibility. We can also just block them from mounting at all, as you saw. And then within each of those rules, we can set up overrides related to serial number. We can set up overrides related to vendor ID. So you can say like, oh, only SanDisk devices can mount in my environment. We can set up overrides related to the encryption status of the drive. So you could set it up so that only encrypted devices are able to be used, and those are work machines or whatever. And additionally, you could set it up, you could have an allow list instead of a block list. And at that point, it would be much more difficult for the attacker to know sort of, yeah, I can spoof my serial, but how do I spoof it to like a known device that's going to be allowed? So there's some options to get in there, but yeah, again, at the end of the day, a super persistent attacker may be able to do things like that, and that's where some of the Pro and Protect integrations can help you out as well.
I was thinking the same thing, that the Pro and Protect integration is probably a good way to come at that, but maybe that's not the level at which the asker of the question wants to address the problem, So what you could do is just continue to monitor for other USBs that are attached by that same, the attacker's, on the attacker's machine, and you could block those, and maybe you can be notified about that. I'm not sure.
Somebody who is better at Splunk than I would be able to set up a Splunk search that would be able to say, hey, a different device plugged in that had these files on it, give me the serial number for it. I know for a fact that's possible, and I also know for a fact I can't do it.
Nice. Going in that theme, does Jamf Protect have the option to remediate threats automatically? I think we saw some of that with the automatic block with threat prevention. And does it remediate all threats?
Does not remediate all threats.
Yeah, all threats is the big thing there. Like, just from the standpoint of like under promising and over delivering, it's hard to say that. But I can say that, as I said, we have been at the forefront. Our Threat Labs team, especially, they're awesome, incredibly intelligent, and incredibly driven individuals that have been at the forefront of stopping several like new and bespoke attacks. These behavior-based detections that we have, we're taking a look as well, like what behaviors are we seeing that are new and original, and let's set up YARA rules to stop these. Let's set up, file hash or signature things to stop these as well. The first part of that question had to do with blocking things, and I wonder if they're talking about like behavior-based blocking as opposed to sort of threat prevention. And I will say that that's something that I really like my job, so I can't speak too much about specifics on timelines or what we have on the backlog or anything like that. But I will say a lot of folks are looking for that, and it's something that we're certainly taking a look at how that could be done.
Cool. A slightly different threat that might come through. If someone is taking screenshots before resigning, maybe, can Jamf Protect detect that and block that suspicious activity?
We do have a screenshot monitor.
Yeah, I think that's all we'll say on that.
Cool. All right. Let's see. How long does Jamf Protect keep the logs? It doesn't say specifically, but I would imagine that's up to the sim.
Yeah, that's configurable through, I believe, through the sim. I don't think that it's configurable through the Protect UI.
Yeah, Protect can't tell Splunk to delete stuff out of Splunk. So it's going to be up to your Splunk admin, or if you are the Splunk admin, that's going to be configured on the sim side. I wonder though if that question had more to do with like the alert logs and things like that. And there are some data retention policies around there that are going to be a little bit different. I think there's like a file size limit as well as a time limit. They're very generous. We do also have the option. We didn't talk about it. But all of that stuff can also be forwarded to data collection like S3 or Azure Sentinel or something like that. So if you have an S3 bucket, you can just forward all of this stuff there and keep it in perpetuity.
Cool. Can we just turn off USB read and write entirely with an allowed list of users who need it for their job tasks?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I scoped the default plan, I said, I'm not doing anything fancy yet. The flip side of that is you can have multiple of these plans. So you don't just have to have the default plan. You can have a marketing plan and an engineering plan and a C-level plan. And you can customize all of these settings for each of those plans individually and then scope those plans out through Jamf Pro. So if you have a smart group in Jamf Pro for your C-levels, or probably a static group for your C-levels, let's be honest, but you can scope just that plan to those folks and give them read-write privileges, or maybe you go the opposite route and you protect those machines more. Whatever you want to do in your environment is entirely possible and completely customizable with Jamf.
Cool. Is content filtering part of Jamf Protect, or is that part of the Radar Jamf Security Cloud?
Well, I believe Jamf Protect belongs to the Jamf Security Cloud at this point. So I think that does fall under the name Protect, but maybe I shouldn't say so because I don't know for sure.
Yeah, again, we're engineers.
Yeah.
We have some, Tice is giving us a thumbs up.
Cool.
He says it's good. I trust Tice. Thanks, bud.
All right. We have a bunch of different questions in the app here about some additional details, and we're kind of running short a little bit on time. So I think I'm going to direct those to follow up with you maybe after, or if you're in person here, you can find them. But maybe just talk just for a minute about what the difference is between Jamf Protect and Jamf Protect High Compliance.
Yeah. I think we can both kind of tag team this one because it's... so high compliance mode is a thing that you can get where the extension on the machine, so you're going to configure it in the web app still. You're going to configure your plan and your settings and things, and then you're going to just have this configuration profile and you're going to send it down to the device. There's some technical details on the back end about not high compliance mode. It's going to use a bootstrap token and pull down the config dynamically and things like that. High compliance mode is not. It's all going to be in that configuration profile right off the bat. And there's no communication at all between our back end and the extension at that point. So it's really going to be telemetry only. You're not going to be able to have access to things like threat prevention because you're not going to be able to get threat signatures without a connection to our backend. But on the flip side, you have no connection to our backend, and in some environments that is needed. So yeah, high compliance mode is going to give you telemetry, and it's going to give you the ability to configure that plan and push it out with Pro and stuff like that. You're going to lose access to some of those other features, but in exchange, you know that there is zero communication between our extension and our backend to make that happen. I don't know if there's any technical details you want to throw on there. You know a lot about it.
Sure. There's, just because it's so scant in its functionality and it's telemetry only, it's really not technically so interesting.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's fair.
So,
More time for other questions. One more, maybe?
Sure. This one's really short, really just quick yes or no is probably good. Is there an ability to restrict airdrop use to just managed devices? So say you couldn't airdrop to a unmanaged device.
That is not something that Protect has the ability to do.
No.
I believe that MDM has the functionality to control airdrop. I don't know if you can get as granular as to say, I can airdrop to enrolled devices but not unenrolled devices. I do know that MDM has the ability to control airdrop. The other thing that Protect does do, actually the only feature of Protect that we didn't touch on today, is insights, which is really like compliance. And one of the insights that we do monitor is whether or not airdrop is enabled on a machine. So if you're trying to enforce airdrop, you want a little bit more insight into that. We have the ability to see every machine that has airdrop on or off in your environment, and a little compliance dashboard that can tell you more about that, along with like 79 other insights for compliance.
Cool. All right, we are at time, so let's give another round of applause to Maggie and Mike for a great presentation.